Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're decoding something truly wild, the strategic maneuvers that took a simple, local idea and morphed it into an absolute global giant. We're talking about Captain Fresh, a company that looked at the incredibly complex, wildly fragmented seafood industry and just disrupted the whole thing. If you love tearing apart how businesses scale against absolutely impossible odds, you're exactly where you need to be. Let's get right into it.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of scale. Seriously, how does a kid from Mysore with absolutely zero family business background take a modest 5-course seed check and turn it into an 11,000 crore empire, and doing it in just 7 years? That doesn't just happen by luck, right? It's a literal masterclass in aggressive pivoting, trusting your data-driven intuition, and just pure unyielding ambition.
So, part 1, the Mysore boy's dream. Ambition over pedigree.
This whole story kicks off with a cinematic, almost KGF-level kind of ambition. Uthham Gowda's mother drilled it into his head early on that he was destined for something larger than life, and his hustle absolutely matched that vibe. I mean, he lost a college election early on, which sounds small, but it gave him a real taste of resilience. Fast forward to working as an analyst at Tata, where he figured out pretty quickly that if you have rock-solid data, even the highest-level executives are going to stop and listen to you. From there, he dived straight into investment banking. We're talking brutal 48-hour shifts. He even faced personal bankruptcy after a trading stint went completely sideways. But here's the thing. All those extreme highs and crushing lows, they built this layer of mental toughness that became his absolute superpower.
Moving right along to Section 2, Discovering the Seafood Opportunity, Data and Intuition.
After grinding it out in finance, Uthham realized making money just wasn't enough. He wanted an empire. So what does he pick? Seafood. A highly complex, super perishable, massive headache of a market. But he didn't just sit in a cushy office reading macroeconomic reports. No, he hit the road. He spent 90 solid days traversing the entire Indian coastline, all the way from Gujarat to Kolkata. He was out there talking face-to-face with fishermen, agents, and factory owners, literally mapping out every single crack in this totally broken supply chain. That boots-on-the-ground hustle, that's what gave him the ultimate clarity to pull the trigger.
Armed with all that raw, ground-level data, he officially launches Captain Fresh. And what happens next is wild. They go through 3 distinct, super aggressive iterations. They didn't just stubbornly stick to one failing plan. They evolved. They went from a local B2B supplier to a tech-enabled exporter, and finally, into a global giant, scooping up international brands. Let's break down that very first step.
Step 1 was Captain Fresh 1.0. In barely 12 to 15 months, these guys hit a staggering 900 crore in annualized revenue. It's actually insane. They pulled this off by becoming the ultimate one-stop B2B solution. Instead of local retailers pulling their hair out, trying to deal with dozens of different suppliers just to stock different fish, Captain Fresh stepped in. They sourced from 200 different locations across India and dropped it all right at the store's doorstep. Boom. Just like that, they captured a massive 25% market share across major Indian cities.
But then we hit Section 3, hitting the Indian wall, the false peak.
And this is where the story takes a really dramatic turn. Despite pulling in that massive 900 crore revenue, they smacked right into a brutal wall that threatened to tank the whole company. It looked like they'd reached the peak, but it was a total trap. See, on paper, their gross margin looked pretty healthy, around 20 rupees for every 100. But the reality? The unorganized local mafia, the mind-boggling wastage in such a fragmented system, and just rampant payment defaults from customers slashed their actual margin down to a measly 5 rupees. And you simply cannot build a sustainable, scalable machine on a 5 rupee margin in a sector like this.
Plus, they were up against some massive structural nightmares, like what they called the Sunday non-veg syndrome. Basically, because Indian consumers overwhelmingly prefer to buy their fresh meat and seafood on Sundays, this massive, expensive supply chain infrastructure was just sitting there, completely idle for about 9,800 hours a year. When you do the math on that, there was absolutely no path to profitability in the domestic Indian market at the time. Zero. Which brings us to Section 4, the Great Global Pivot. Shock and awe. Faced with this pretty grim reality, Uthham didn't just fold up shop. Instead, he executed this silent, hyper-aggressive pivot into Captain Fresh 2.0. He knew he had to look beyond India's borders to survive. So he goes out, finds 12 completely idle, stressed factories in India, and just leases them. Then he injects serious real-time tracking tech so he can manage this giant pan-India operation right from his lap hut.
They completely stopped worrying about local distribution and shifted gears entirely to processing their high-quality catch for direct export into highly compliant, top-paying Western markets.
And let me tell you, this bold export strategy was the ultimate validation. It triggered explosive revenue growth. By year 4, they were casually hitting 1,400 crores. They successfully smashed their way right into the top 10 seafood exporters in India. The pivot wasn't just working, it was a total game changer.
Now for Section 5, Building a Global Empire, Captain Fresh 3.0.
Because for Uthham, just processing and exporting wasn't the finish line. To become a true global heavyweight, he knew they had to own the end customer. This realization gave birth to Captain Fresh 3.0 and sparked a highly aggressive mergers and acquisitions strategy. To grab the attention of these massive global players, he used his classic shock and awe tactic. He actually got on a call with an advisor for an 8,000 crore company in the US, right? When they asked for an in-person meeting, Uthham literally gave him a 30-minute heads up and hopped on a flight straight to Miami. He walks in and pitches his entire vision of tech and vertical integration to these third-generation business owners. Now, while that specific mega deal didn't fully close exactly as planned on day one, it was a genius move. It proved his absolute audacity to these global gatekeepers, immediately unlocked US distribution, and gave them massive credibility overnight.
Today, that sheer audacity has built a sprawling, interconnected global empire. They are currently sourcing from over 30 different countries. They've successfully snapped up 10 global brands across the US, Mexico, and Europe. They're literally a top 10 seafood player on the planet right now. And why are they winning? It all comes down to their 365-day promise. They are delivering a totally seamless, vertically integrated, one-stop solution to massive global retailers, completely bypassing the headaches of local fishing seasons. And the proof is really in the revenue. Their cash flow is now heavily anchored in the world's most lucrative and heavily regulated markets. We're talking roughly 5,000 crore in the US and another 4,000 crore coming out of Europe. They managed to totally sidestep the fragmented constraints of the local Indian market by taking their world-class sourcing directly to the heavy hitters. But scaling like this comes with some absolutely brutal decisions. To survive and pivot, they had to make the incredibly tough call to dismantle their massive Indian retail operations. They went from a staff of 1,500 down to just 100 people. At the same time, they were going all in globally, bringing on 750 European and 100 American employees. Honestly, the level of emotional control it takes for a founder to execute a shift that drastic, it's pretty rare.
And of course, building at this scale demands some extreme personal sacrifice. Just wrap your head around this number, 940,000 kilometers. That is the distance Uthham traveled in a single year trying to manage this empire across all these time zones. That's practically a world record for commercial flights. Eventually, just to save his own health and tighten up operations, he finally set up base in Amsterdam.
Which brings us to the quote that really captures the core philosophy of everything we've talked about in the explainer today. It is not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Uthham Gowda started out with absolutely zero industry connections, a tiny 5 crore check, and a terribly broken supply chain, but he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that your pedigree matters far, far less than the intensity of the fight inside you.
So, as we wrap up and you process the blueprint of this wild 11,000 crore journey, I want to leave you with a thought. Take a hard look at your own career, your own business, or whatever goals you're chasing. What massive peak are you willing to trek toward against absolutely all odds? Thanks for hanging out with me for the explainer today. Keep climbing.